Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right, I follow the news closely, especially China related news. But over the last 2 days, the Trump-Zelensky rift has completely dominated the headlines and social media. Everywhere you turn, it's Russia-U.S. relations, Trump versus Zelensky. And today, news came out that the U.S. declines to co-sponsor UN resolution backing Ukraine. And also, Zelensky didn't hold a joint presser with U.S. envoy. So those are the conversation right now. So talking about China almost feels out of touch at this moment. I decided to take a closer look at Trump-Putin and Trump-Zelensky relations instead. Let me start by saying I'm not an expert on European affairs, nor do I have a special focus on U.S. politics. I also don't want to oversimplify the complexities behind the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. And I get it. Opinions on the recent Trump-Zelensky exchanges and U.S.-Russia relations are deeply divided. These heated debates piqued my interest because I noticed something. China is being left out. That got me thinking, what's China's reaction? And that's when I stumbled upon something interesting. I think I accidentally figured out why Trump is upset with Zelensky. Of course, there are many explanations um, of why the U.S. president isn't happy with the Ukrainian president. I mean, that's a very complex subject in itself. But I want to offer one particular angle to explore the subject. At its core, based on what I've seen, the driving force behind the Russia-Ukraine peace talks is still U.S. China rivalry. It's still Trump's ideological war with communism or socialism. Trump's team sees China as America's biggest adversary. So here's my conclusion. I want to give you my conclusion before I get into the details because there are tons of details. Trump is mad at Zelensky because he cozied up to Beijing too early, way too soon, and the timing is too sensitive. Okay, so how do I know? The Chinese media said it themselves. Right after Trump survived the assassination attempt last July, Zelensky extended an olive branch to Beijing. And that, my friend, is where things start to get really interesting. All right, so let's talk about the Ukraine-China relations. They haven't been friendly since during the war due to China's support to Russia. China's state-controlled media and social media overwhelmingly side with Russia. Since the start of the war, Xi Jinping has only spoken with Zelensky once in a phone call in 2023, while he has met with Putin in person 5 times since the war broke out. However, something changed last July when Ukrainian Foreign Minister, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Dmytro Kuleba, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, when he visited China from July 23rd to 26th. His visit marked the first high-level Ukrainian official's visit since the outbreak of the war in February 2022. However, a key detail stood out. Throughout his 4-day visit, the minister didn't set his foot in Beijing. He met with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, in Guangzhou. I actually have a picture. Here's the picture. That's where they met. Then the Ukrainian minister went to Hong Kong, where he met with Hong Kong's chief executive, John Lee. Wang Yi's meeting with the Ukrainian minister didn't produce a joint statement. There's a scholar specializing in China-Russia relations at the German Academy for Advanced Studies. His name is, Dr. Alexander Dubin. He told BBC that in Chinese diplomatic traditions, such arrangements are rare, are rarely coincidental. That's what he said. Meaning the fact that he went to China for a visit, but they didn't meet in Beijing. So Dr. Dubin suggested that Beijing may have deliberately scheduled the meeting outside the capital, symbolically lowering the level of the meeting. So it's obvious that Beijing was reluctant to engage with Kiev at the time. Adding to the intrigue, even before the minister's visit concluded, Wang Yi had already traveled to Laos to meet with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. The Chinese issued a press statement without mentioning the Ukraine situation, but Russia's TASS news agency quoted Lavrov as saying that Wang Yi had briefed him on the discussions with the Ukrainian minister. So the Ukrainian foreign minister's visit to Beijing came at a delicate moment. It was 10 days after Donald Trump survived an assassination and 2 days after the pro-Ukraine Joe Biden announced his withdrawal from the race. Judging by China's lukewarm reception of the Ukrainian, it's very obvious that Zelensky reached out to China and requested the meeting. But the timing is problematic from Donald Trump's perspective. Why was Zelensky in such a hurry to reach out to China, Trump's biggest adversary, immediately after the attempted assassination on Donald Trump? This is problematic. And then 2 months later, Zelensky visited the U.S. in September 2024. His visit to the Scranton Army Ammunition Plant in Pennsylvania sparked controversy. The event, organized by Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., was attended exclusively by Democratic officials, including Governor Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor of Pennsylvania, and also Senator Bob Casey. House Speaker Mike Johnson criticized Zelensky's visit as a partisan effort to support Kamala Harris's campaign, alleging election interference. This incident further strained Trump-Zelensky relations, but I think what made it even worse is the Ukrainian president's continued effort to side with China. Now, Zelensky's attitude change toward China is picked up by the Chinese. On January 2nd, here we go. 2025, January 2nd this year, a Chinese military commentator wrote a piece on Sohu, or I think it was he wrote. I don't know where he actually published it, but Sohu, I found it on Sohu, and the title was, "Has Ukraine's attitude toward China changed? Zelensky's close aide makes a request to China." And so let me read you the article. I mean, it's pretty insightful. I mean, it's written by a Chinese, and it's obviously from the Chinese perspective. So this is what it says. So I'll read it to you. As Trump's inauguration draws closer, subtle shifts are occurring within Ukraine. In particular, recent interactions between Ukrainian President Zelensky and China have drawn significant international attention. Trump has consistently criticized the current U.S. policy on aid to Ukraine, repeatedly stating that he would end the Russia-Ukraine conflict within 24 hours of taking office. However, this is far from good news for Ukraine, as it could place the country at risk of territorial concessions, an outcome that Zelensky and his team find absolutely unacceptable. Under this pressure, Ukraine has swiftly adjusted its strategy, shifting its focus to China. And then it says a global influential yet neutral player. Zelensky's recent meeting with China's newly appointed ambassador has become a focal point of attention. Let me share with you the picture. Here we go. Here's their meeting. After receiving the ambassador's credentials, as this picture shows, Zelensky expressed a strong commitment to developing Ukraine-China relations, emphasizing the importance of strengthening exchanges at various levels and deepening cooperation in multiple fields. The Chinese writer continues. Just days later, the head of Ukraine's presidential office, meaning the guy in charge of Zelensky's office, also met with the Chinese ambassador. The two discussed prospects for Ukraine-China cooperation. Notably, the Ukrainian presented the Chinese envoy with a hat, praising China's significant role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I mean, when I read this, I was like, I couldn't believe it. What? You mean China's significant role in Russia-Ukraine conflict? I mean, China supports Russia. Why would the Ukrainians praise the Chinese here? Anyways, let me continue. Okay, so the article goes, it is worth mentioning that during the meeting, Yermak, which is the guy who heads up Zelensky's presidential office, Yermak made a special request. He explored the possibility of initiating a high-level bilateral dialogue. This could suggest that Zelensky is seeking a direct meeting with Chinese leadership and hopes the ambassador will pass along the message. Furthermore, in early December, this is still, I'm not making comments, this is still the Chinese article. Furthermore, in early December, during a visit by senior EU officials to Kiev, Zelensky made a surprising remark, stating that maintaining ties with China, the world's second largest economy, would be beneficial. This statement was unexpected, given that Ukraine heavily relies on the EU for military aid, and Zelensky rarely contradicts EU officials. Zelensky's successive moves toward China have signaled a possible shift in Ukraine's stance. Why is Zelensky making this pivot? Because the geopolitical landscape has changed. When Trump assumes office, he is likely to shake up international politics. Ukraine, currently engaged in fierce battles with Russia, is heavily reliant on a steady supply of weapons, most of which come from the U.S. and its NATO allies. Now consider the scenario in which Trump prioritizes his America First policy. The consequences? A reduction or withdrawal of funding and military aid, an outcome that Ukraine cannot afford to contemplate. Okay, end of quote. All right, so, I mean, the Chinese basically spelled everything out in this article. I mean, their observation is correct. I mean, I can't disagree with the Chinese observation. But I think Zelensky made a big mistake by waving olive branches to Beijing. I mean, Beijing has aided Russia during the war and isn't interested in ending the conflict. For him to engage Beijing is asking for trouble. Even the Chinese find it odd, right? As this writer indicated at the end. I mean, Ukraine was or has been taken advantage of by Beijing because they provided China its military technology. China used that technology and supports Russia in attacking Ukraine. So why would Zelensky trust the Chinese again? I mean, he wasn't the one who decided to supply China with the military technologies, but why would he trust China, given Ukraine's bad history with the CCP? Beijing's involvement could only make things more complicated and nasty. Okay, then on February 15th this year, which was only, a few days ago, 5 days ago, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with the new Ukrainian Foreign Minister. His name is I'm trying to pronounce, Sabiha. I don't know. I have a hard time. Lei is challenged, but I have a picture. So you know who I'm talking about. So they met during the Munich Security Conference. So the Chinese said the Ukrainians requested the meeting. Okay? In the CCTV footage, Wang Yi was heard saying, China and Ukraine have had a tradition of friendship, and being strategic partners since 2011. And he said, some countries may not be aware of this, so I will take this opportunity to disclose this fact once again in front of the media. And the Chinese netizens reacted to this footage strongly by commenting, by saying, so since when we became friends with the Ukraine? Aren't we supposed to be friends with Russia? And that's the Chinese reaction. I mean, not even U.S. reaction. And then China's foreign ministry posted this statement on its website. Or let me say, the Xinhua. I didn't verify if it's on the website, but the Xinhua news agency published this statement, which came from China's foreign ministry. So this is what it says. It says, Wang Yi reiterated that friendship between China and Ukraine has deep roots and that their strategic partnership established in 2011 has remained stable. In recent years, China has been Ukraine's largest trading partner, which, given the current geopolitical situation, has not been easy to maintain. And highlights the potential and scope of cooperation between the two countries. He affirmed that China views Ukraine as a friend and partner, always approaching bilateral relations from a long-term perspective. China is willing to work with Ukraine to overcome adverse factors, advance bilateral relations, and engage in practical cooperation. Okay, I think overcome adverse factors, I think that's probably referring to the Trump administration. Okay, and then this is what the Chinese said. This is the Chinese disclosure of the Ukrainian foreign minister's statement. So this is what it says. The Ukrainian foreign minister responded by stating that Ukraine and China have maintained ongoing communication and their peoples share a friendly relationship. He highlighted the mutually beneficial and win-win nature of Ukraine-China cooperation, which has brought tangible benefits to both nations. He reaffirmed Ukraine's strict adherence to the One China principle and expressed willingness to deepen engagement with China, further strengthening the strategic partnership between the two countries. So we know since the war broke out, Taiwan has been on Ukraine's side. I don't know how Taiwanese feel about at this point when Ukraine supports the One China principle. The Ukraine, I mean, if it's true, I don't know, because this is the Chinese statement of what the Ukrainian foreign minister said. I'm sure he has said it. Otherwise, I mean, this is a pretty big statement. You can't fake it. So Ukraine's support of Beijing's One China principle is certainly a slap in the face to the U.S. a slap in the face to Trump after the U.S. leads all Western countries in sending Ukraine money and weapons, while China has supported Russia. I don't know how you feel, but as an American and someone who loves Taiwan, I find it really odd that the Ukraine, is making this statement. So while Ukraine is pivoting to China, Russia has started to be critical of Beijing. Recently, Alexander Losev, a board member of the Russia's Council on Foreign and Defense Policy in Moscow, made an unusually harsh criticism of China on Russia's public television. It was on January 31st, while appearing on a program called Reflections. Losev told Russian viewers, he said, "I'm deeply disappointed that Russia is still celebrating Chinese New Year." And when the host interjected, saying, but after all, it looks quite beautiful, Losev immediately responded, "Let's think about it. During the period of special military operations, is it really appropriate to exaggerate the celebration of a foreign holiday in such a deliberate manner?" And he further pointed out, some people say this is cultural exchange between Russia and China, But do you realize that the vast majority of drones used by the Ukrainian armed forces come from China? Thousands of Chinese drones are slaughtering our soldiers and civilians. Is this what we call cultural exchange? Well, I checked. While China has not directly supplied military drones to Ukraine, its commercial drone products have been widely used by Ukrainian forces. And in October 2023, Ukrainian Prime Minister stated that his country was purchasing a significant portion of Chinese drone maker DJI's global output of a type of drone called Mavic drones for defense purposes. But China, I think Russia has reacted to that. So recently, China has limited the export of drone parts or parts of drones, so that Ukraine is not getting as much as before. Anyways, so this guy Losev is an economist and a geopolitical analyst, and his latest remark, and he appeared on Russian TV quite frequently. His latest remarks highlight deepening frustration within Moscow's financial and economic circles toward Beijing. And he accused China of deliberately blocking Russian banking transactions for months and refusing to supply equipment for the Arctic LNG-2 project, which led to its collapse after China unilaterally tore up the contract. When the host suggested that economic growth in China necessitated cultural exchange, Losev retorted, "Modern so-called Chinese culture is merely a consumer culture focused on physical needs." And he said, "Why does it seem like China is progressing? It's because China is now entirely driven by consumerism. There is no God in China anymore. Modern China no longer believes in God. People there only care about eating, drinking, and sex. And that is enough for them. Their physical needs drive their development. This is a culture that only focuses on short-term gains." And he said, "In today's mainland China, the rich cultural heritage of ancient Chinese civilization has been completely abandoned. Ancient Chinese wisdom is merely mentioned in passing, but never actually practiced. Works like Lao Tzu's Dao De Jing and Zhuangzi and the story of the butterfly dream are just empty words. No one truly follows them anymore." End quote. Losev's blunt criticism of China stand in stark contrast to Russia's mainstream media's narrative, which has long portrayed an unshakable Russia-China friendship. But I must say his observations of today's China is not false. It's quite accurate. Please know that Russia's public television is a state-owned TV channel and covers 99.8% of the Russian population. So his remarks on federal TV have drawn widespread attention and raised eyebrows, as many are surprised by how quickly Moscow has turned against Beijing with such harsh rhetoric. The Trump administration has deemed China the U.S. #1 adversary and has made breaking the Russia-China alliance its top priority. In the impossible love triangle of China, Russia, and the U.S., China fears this breakup. You can sense this anxiety in Chinese media coverage on the recent U.S.-Russia talk in Saudi Arabia. It's like saying, "They met, so what? But he still loves me." Okay, so let me read you the Chinese coverage. So it says Lavrov, which is the Russian foreign minister, Lavrov stated that both sides listen to each other's views, and Russia has reason to believe that the U.S. has begun to better understand Russia's position. However, he added, understanding does not mean reconciliation. There's a lot of nuance in Lavrov's statement. Yes, they met and talked, but the national interests of the U.S. and Russia will never fully align. Moreover, the conflicts and frictions of the past few years cannot simply be brushed aside as if nothing has happened. The normalization of U.S.-Russia relations is bound to be a long and difficult process. From China's perspective, Lavrov's remarks amount to a debriefing, an acknowledgement that the U.S.-Russia talks produced some results, but that there will be no major shift in Russia-U.S. relations. Russia's national interests prevent it from cooperating with the U.S. in any strategy to contain China. Okay, so it goes on. Meanwhile, Trump may be trying to use this opportunity to pull Russia back into the Western camp and play the align with Russia to contain China strategy. Based on available information, Trump has been making moves to normalize U.S.-Russia relations. But the problem is the align with Russia to contain China strategy is a false proposition with no room for implementation. And then goes on how great China-Russia relations has been, and how it's indestructible. The China-Russian bond is indestructible. And it ended by quoting, by saying this. It says, after discussing that is why, after discussing U.S.-Russia relations at the Russian State Duma, Lavrov made the following assessment of Russian-China relations. Quote, Russia looks forward to engaging in joint diplomatic efforts with China this year, including cooperation at the highest level. The Russia-China partnership has now reached an unprecedented high. The two countries have established coordinated mechanisms across all fields, exceeding any past traditional alliance in both nature and substance. Yesterday, China and Russia announced that their leader will visit each other to attend events commemorating the end of World War II. Putin has certainly raised the bar for Trump and wants to have more bargaining chips in his hand. Zelensky is also making things difficult for Trump by cozying up with China. When both Russia and Ukraine play the China card, this has put China in a precarious situation, in my opinion. It will force Trump to severely punish Beijing through tariffs. This isn't just a triangle. It's a four-player geopolitical chess match where Trump, Zelensky, Putin, and Xi are all maneuvering for leverage. Zelensky cozies up to China. Putin plays hard to get. Xi Jinping scrambles to hold on to Russia. And Trump? Well, I think in the end, Putin, Zelensky, and Xi Jinping all face the same reality. When it comes to global power, all roads still lead to Washington. By the way, under Trump, the U.S. State Department has stopped using People's Republic of China as a description for mainland China in a country fact sheet on the State Department's website. It simply calls it China. And the State Department's fact sheet on Taiwan dropped the phrase, we do not support Taiwan independence, and added a reference to Taiwan's cooperation with a Pentagon technology and semiconductor development project, and says the U.S. will support Taiwan's membership in international organizations where applicable. So with that, I will end here. Hopefully, I have presented some a different angle to explain why things turn out to be the way they are. But I'm sure it's more complex than what I just said. But I don't think you would have access to the Chinese information that I read you. But I think the information I gave you is an important aspect of the subject. That's all. That's all I have. All right. Oh yeah, this is the article that commented on the U.S. Russia meeting in Saudi Arabia. All right, so it's a lot to say. Let me see. Have I put people to sleep? Okay, have I done a wonderful job? And put people to sleep? Okay, let's see. All right. Michael A. Mayo, thanks for the talk. Well, thank you, Michael. Let me see. Norbert Klotz, do you really believe that Europe is completely sidelined in this geopolitical game? That's a good question. I think this is my early assessment of the situation. This is just my very early, assessment of. I think if you really look at the past 4 years, what has happened in the United States, and if you look at what has happened in Europe in the past year, Trump is fighting an ideological war with communism, socialism, and the far left ideology. I think in his mind, this is a far more important war than the Russia-Ukraine war. In his mind, the Russia-Ukraine war should never have happened. It's just a nonsense conflict that should never have happened because it. But in his mind, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is not as important as the ideological war that he has with the far left, with communism, with socialism, and he wants to bring back tradition, faith, and tradition, and in his words, common sense. So he is reshifting the geopolitical landscape, and he's realigning himself. And he sees that some of the traditional allies of the United States have become on the far left. And Ukraine is certainly on the left. And so his number one goal is, and he sees that Trump shares his vision, in this ideological war that matters to him. So his number one priority is to break the Putin-China alliance. This is far more important to him in this ideological war. So that's my read into the situation, because he understands the harm that communism, socialism, and the far left ideology has on the world, not just the United States, but around the world. So from that perspective, that's why he chooses Putin. That's why Putin is so important to him, because they do share more or less, I mean, I can't say all of it, but that vision. I'm not saying that I agree with him. I'm just saying that's my observation. So that's my observation of the situation. So don't fight me, because I'm just a messenger. That's just what I see. Okay. Let's see. David Jennings, Lei is correct. The battle is in America with the far left. He sees Marxist influence clearly. Expect him to act to prevent USPS from delivering mail in the US from China. Yeah, China is the biggest his biggest adversary. I mean, he's communism, socialism. That's very clear. And everything. I mean, if you look at the State Department's wording change today, that tells you something. China is protesting, right? China is protesting. I mean, the fact that they removed the phrase that says U.S. Does not support. What did it say? U.S. does not support Taiwan independence. They removed that line. I mean, they didn't say What does it say? Yeah, we do not support Taiwan independence. That line is removed. That's significant. That's that's that certainly will make Xi Jinping very upset, because Xi Jinping's strategy was to somehow lure Trump into agreeing that the United States do not support Taiwan independence. And then now, I mean, Trump just removes it from the website. So it's very clear. It's an ideological war. It's more of an ideological war than geopolitical war. And if you saw the speech that the vice president gave in Europe, it kind of hinted at that, right? It's more of a, the United States is finding partners that who share its value and vision, and that's not a country that's on the far left. So all right, so that's just my observation. Um, um, Mitch, so Trump is a person that is willing to destroy whoever he can get through to achieve his goals. That's the similarities between Putin and Trump. I think at this point, I mean, that's one observation. I mean, that's what a lot of people say about Trump. But I think at this point, it's still too early to say what's being destroyed. I mean, there's a perception of destruction, but what's being destroyed? You know, I mean, if you really, I think no one, what struck me, I mean, I hear what people say. That's what it looks at on the surface. But when I really, I study on this really hard today. I have no idea that I'm going to come up with this to tell you. But at the end of my study, I came up with one conclusion. Because I really studied the 4 countries, I came up with one conclusion. I think Trump wants to end the war more than Zelensky. That's just my conclusion. I mean, it's not because, I mean, this is a very fair objective. If Zelensky really wants to end the war, he would make a lot of decisions differently. He would not have approached China. Absolutely not. So I just look at a lot of the decisions people make. So it's still too early to say what's being destroyed here and who destroyed what. Even there are things to be destroyed, it's still too early to say, well, what's being destroyed and who destroyed what, or who does what part to destroy what. It's all perception. It's all fear. I don't know. I just think it's fascinating. What I can tell myself is keep an open mind and watch how it will revolve. Because I had no idea that Ukraine actually wants to be on China's side. I mean, that was like eye-opening for me. I mean, why? I mean, of all the allies, if Zelensky really wants to end the war, he should go to the European allies and say, hey, give me more support. Right? I mean, why do you go to China? I mean, China is not going to give you anything. It's only going to cause more trouble. It's only going to divide, China is going to divide Zelensky's support base. That's what it's going to do. So I don't understand why he decides to go to, I mean, of course, maybe he thought that by going to China, he will have more bargaining chips to negotiate with Trump, but it doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't work that way. Anyways, I just hope we can all have a open mind and see what happens. Remove our emotions from this. It is what it is. We cannot change it because It's not in our hands. It's not in my hand. We're observers. The more objective we remain, the better. And all I can say, it's interesting. All right. Okay. All right. That's all for tonight. I will end it here. I get a headache after after talking about this. Oh, here's a question. Chris forwarded. From Kauschlandstra. Oh my goodness, that's a long name. I'm sorry. Um, where did the question go? It disappeared on me. Oh, here we go. What do you think of Zelensky keeping on letting Ukrainians die for 3 years on a war he could not win? I don't know. I mean, that's the question that many of the people who are critical of Zelensky ask this question. Uh, I don't know why. You know, so I'm sure if he really is interested in ending the war, there are many things he can do. Um, some of the things he's doing, is not productive, is counterproductive, I must say, because you need everyone's help to help your people, help your country. You cannot be emotional and pick and choose and, making. I think he's trying to pull a lot of strings to play, to play things, but that's not in his best interest. If your interest is really ending the war and protect your people, then you need to work with everyone, right? You need to work with anyone who can give you any help to end it if you truly want to protect your people. But if your interest is your power, your authority, then you're going to pull certain strings. I mean, in the Chinese culture, we learn that sometimes the weakest person gets the most support because everyone wants to help him or her. The difficult person, people walk away. It's like, why bother? So we all know that in the Chinese culture, when you want people to help you, you need to behave, you need to be good, you need to listen, you need to work with people. And you need to be able to take criticisms. That's the thing. I found a lot of the Western politicians, I don't know. I don't know. It's just my observation that people have a hard time, taking criticisms. And this is on both ends. I'm not just saying one versus the other. They all seem to have this problem. Okay. Someone asked me, did you see Zelensky refusing Trump's deal to secure $500 billion worth of Ukraine rare earth for the USA? I think the latest update is that he had a great meeting with General Kellogg. I think they reached some agreement because Zelensky posted on X, on social media, saying great things about the meeting. But then they didn't do a joint press conference afterwards as they previously agreed, because the U.S. canceled that. The U.S. didn't want to do a joint press conference. So that got people nervous, wondering what has happened. I think the U.S. meeting with Ukraine went well. I think they made significant progress in reaching an agreement. And I think the reason, this is just my guess, the reason the U.S. pulled the joint conference is probably not to annoy Putin. I mean, that's just my guess. Okay, I know you all have different opinions. You may agree or not agree with me. That's fine. But let's just have an open mind about this. I just think it's fascinating. All right, that's all. That's all for tonight. Somebody say she's big on Trump. Well, not necessarily. I think Trump wasn't wise in calling Zelensky a dictator. I mean, calling him only having 4% support. I mean, what's the point? It's just not very savvy, it's not necessary. It's completely not necessary. So I think I think it only makes it more interesting when we have two characters. It's utterly boring when you only have one class of actor, right? That's what I tend to see, uh, the mistakes made on both sides, and that's what make it interesting. It's impossible that one side is absolutely always correct, flawless, perfect, and all the mistakes are made by the other side. Then it's utterly boring. Then what kind of game is that? It's not, it's impossible. So both sides make mistakes. Both sides have some good arguments, have some strength, have some good points, but they all, stumble and make mistakes and fall. And that's why it becomes what it is now, right? But we have to remain rational to observe that. All right. Okay, that's all for tonight. I said too much. All right. See you next time. Bye bye.